just like my husband Carl I lost. And of course, that's the hardest loss that anyone could ever have, to lose the person you love the most. And a husband for 60, a very loyal, devoted person.
In March 2025, the woman worth $650 million sat alone in her Nashville home and cried. Not because of money or fame or any of the things the world expects to break people.
She is the most successful country artist of all time, helping her build an empire in excess $500 million.
She cried because the man who had looked at her face instead of her fame for 60 years was gone. And right there, in that quiet grief, you finally see who Dolly Parton actually is. The $650 million woman who still feels poor. On March 3, 2025, Carl Dean died in Nashville at the age of 82. He had been married to Dolly Parton for 58 years. He had never given a single interview. He had never walked a red carpet beside her. He had never once tried to share the spotlight she carried everywhere she went. And yet the moment Dolly posted that tearful statement on Instagram, the whole world stopped scrolling. She wrote that they had spent 60 precious and meaningful years together, and that, like all great love stories, theirs would never end. Weeks later, she appeared on the Today Show and could barely hold it together.
Just seeing all those points in my life and how all that has affected me, it's been healing in a way.
She said she was doing fine, staying busy with work, because work had always been the thing that saved her. Her voice broke just slightly when she said she would always miss him and always love him. And then, true to form, she went straight back to work. On paper, what this woman has built is almost impossible to take in. She has 25 #1 singles on the Billboard country charts, a record for female artists in the history of country music. Her net worth sits at an estimated $650 million, pulled together from music royalties, the Dollywood theme park empire, film production deals, and licensing agreements.
First one was about my songwriting, and it was called Songteller. And then there was My Life in Rhinestones, behind the scenes.
In 2022, Jeff Bezos handed her a $100 million Courage and Civility Award for her charity work in children's literacy. By the end of 2025, her Imagination Library had gifted over 300 million books to children across 5 countries.
But then when we started to write the latest book, when I thought that, it's going to be about my life on the road, my life on stage, and the behind the scenes.
She also has a children's hospital named after her. And yet, even as all of this was happening, she postponed her Las Vegas residency in late 2025 because of health challenges, joking on Instagram that God hadn't said anything about stopping yet. The $650 million woman still operates like someone who expects it all to be taken away. And once you understand where she came from, that stops being surprising. It becomes the only thing that makes sense. What she has never fully explained, not in any interview, not in any song, is exactly why the drive never stops. The answer begins not with fame or ambition, it begins with a sack of cornmeal. The cabin that built her and broke her. Before the rhinestones, before the wigs, before the $650 million smile, there was a transaction that tells you everything.
Well, that's what I hear, but I count my blessings more than I count my money. Let's put it that way. I know the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
A doctor delivered a baby girl into the world, and her father paid him with a sack of cornmeal. Not a check, not cash, grain. That is the economy Dolly Parton was born into on January 19, 1946, in a one-room cabin in Pittman Center, Tennessee. 12 children, no electricity, no running water. In winter, ice formed on the inside of the windows. 3 of her brothers didn't survive. One named Larry made it 4 days. She has spent decades insisting they didn't know they were poor. And maybe that's true, but knowing and feeling are 2 different things. Because here is what actually broke something in her. Not the cold, not the hunger. A coat. Her mother stitched it together from donated scraps, every color of leftover fabric she could find, sewn together by hand out of pure love. Dolly walked into school that morning feeling like royalty, like Joseph and his coat of many colors. She was 8 years old, and she had never felt more beautiful in her life. Her classmates took one look and called it a pile of rags. She went home that day carrying something no #1 single has ever fully lifted. That coat, and the children who laughed at it, became the engine underneath everything she would ever build. The song she eventually wrote about that morning was added to the Library of Congress. The coat itself was lost. She later bought back the family farm just to hold on to whatever roots she could still reach. But even in that cabin, even with nothing, there was music. Her mother sang Appalachian ballads over a wood stove. Her grandfather rattled the walls of a mountain church with gospel on Sundays. And by 7 years old, Dolly was already writing her own songs on whatever scraps of paper she could find, with whatever pencil still had lead. 10 years old, Knoxville radio. 13, the Grand Ole Opry stage, introduced by Johnny Cash. 3 encores. Bare feet on hallowed ground. The girl from the cabin was already a performer. What nobody warned her about was the industry waiting on the other side of those mountains.
Dolly's secret is her ability to appeal to new generations of music fans who celebrate her unique sound and style.
But the industry she was heading toward had its own rules, and for a woman who refused to follow them, it had very specific ways of pushing back. What Nashville does to women who won't shrink. Country music in the 1960s had a very clear set of rules for women. You were a voice, not a visionary. You recorded what you were given. You expressed gratitude for the opportunity. Dolly Parton arrived in Nashville in 1964 with no money, a cardboard suitcase, and the entirely inconvenient belief that she was the real thing. Monument Records eventually signed her, but what happened next almost never gets told. Monument did not want her doing country music at all. They thought her voice was too high, too unusual. They steered her toward pop and rock, and for almost 2 years, Dolly Parton recorded songs she did not believe in for a label that did not understand who she was. What finally cracked the door open was something almost accidental. She sang uncredited harmony on a Bill Phillips song called Put It Off Until Tomorrow, and the record went to number 6 on the country charts. Disc jockeys became obsessed with trying to identify the voice on the track. The industry that had dismissed her was now actively chasing the anonymous sound she had made on someone else's record. Only then did Monument agree to let her record country music. She had to become a mystery before they would let her become herself. Her 1967 debut single reached number 24 on the country charts. But the business machinery was already building her next cage. The label's owner had advised her against getting married, warning it would complicate promotion. She and Carl Dean secretly married anyway in Ringgold, Georgia, on May 30, 1966, and kept it hidden for a full year. She had already decided that this was how she would survive this industry. Nod, smile, and do exactly what she had already decided to do. That strategy was about to be tested in ways she didn't see coming. The man who would nearly perfect it and profit from it was already waiting. 7 years inside Porter Wagoner's shadow. When Porter Wagoner offered Dolly a spot on his show in 1967 for $60,000 a year, she accepted immediately. For a woman who had been surviving on crackers and ketchup packets stolen from diners, a steady paycheck of that size felt like her life finally beginning. Their on-screen chemistry was real. Their duets climbed the charts. Porter taught her things about commanding a stage and reading an audience that no classroom could have taught her. She has said publicly that she could sing when she met Porter, but after knowing him, she knew how to perform. But what Porter also did, methodically and with the practiced ease of someone who had always set the terms, was own her. He controlled her recordings. He dictated her song choices. He took a significant percentage of her earnings. She described him in a 2008 interview as having strong chauvinistic tendencies, and said their constant clashes came from his need to dominate and her absolute refusal to be dominated. He also tried psychological control. He told her that RCA would drop her the moment she left his show. That was a complete lie. She flew to New York on her own, met with RCA directly, and told them she was going independent. They were, in her words, totally excited and completely behind her. Porter had been bluffing the entire time, and she had just called it. In 1974, after 7 years, she sat by her fireplace and wrote the song. Not a fight song, not an accusation. A goodbye wrapped so completely in warmth and gratitude that he could not even be angry about it. She went to his office the next day and sang I Will Always Love You directly to him. 5 years later, he filed a lawsuit demanding $3 million. She settled for around $1 million to spare her family a public battle. It took everything she had, everything Carl had, and everything she could earn for years to come. She was at Porter's bedside when he died in 2007, and she has never spoken about him with bitterness. The settlement nearly broke her, but the songs she had refused to surrender were about to make her richer than anyone had imagined, including Elvis Presley himself. The songs that rewrote the rules. There is one detail about that night in 1974 that stops people cold when they hear it. Dolly Parton wrote both Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the same night. She discovered this years later, finding old cassette tapes she hadn't touched in decades. Her reaction when she shared this publicly was exactly what you'd expect. Buddy, that was a good night. When I Will Always Love You went to number 1, Elvis Presley's team came calling. Elvis wanted to record it. Dolly said no. Colonel Tom Parker's standing rule, no recording without half the publishing rights. She turned it down flat. Everyone around her said she was out of her mind. She told Parker directly that these songs were what she was leaving her family when she was gone, and she was not giving half of them to anyone. She had established her own publishing company in 1966, before she had any real leverage, before anyone was paying attention. Ownership was the only lasting protection. So she said no to Elvis, cried about it alone for a night, and moved on. In 1992, Whitney Houston recorded the song for The Bodyguard. 14 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Dolly received more than $6 million in royalties. She joked afterward that she made enough to buy Graceland. The percussion driving 9 to 5, that clicking rhythm that makes the song instantly recognizable, came from Dolly clacking her acrylic fingernails together backstage between film takes. The most commercially successful song of her career was improvised with her own hands while she waited to go back in front of a camera. It reached number 1 on both the country and pop charts in 1981 and earned her an Academy Award nomination. Her catalogue of over 3,000 songs generates $6 to $8 million in annual royalties, valued at approximately $150 million. She watched Porter control her because she didn't own her work. She spent the rest of her career making certain she always would. But the catalogue was only one piece of what she was building. The next move would be the most audacious of her career, and it would happen just miles from the cabin where she was born. Building a kingdom where she once went hungry. In 1986, Dolly Parton took an ownership stake in a struggling amusement park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, renamed it Dollywood, and bet her entire reputation on the belief that people would drive into the Smoky Mountains to walk through her story. The site sat just a few miles from the one-room cabin where she was born without electricity or running water. Critics dismissed it immediately. A vanity project. A gamble she would regret. What they consistently missed was that she had already done the math. She always does. Dollywood now draws 3.1 million visitors annually and ranks among the 20 most popular theme parks in the United States. It is the economic engine of East Tennessee. Thousands of jobs in a region the rest of the country had written off decades ago. She built an empire in the exact valley where the world once told her nothing was worth building. In 1995, she launched the Imagination Library, a program that mails free books monthly to children from birth through age 5. It started in Sevier County, Tennessee, and grew from a wound she had carried her entire life. Her father, the smartest man she says she ever knew, could not read a single word of the songs she wrote about him. Before he died, he told her the Imagination Library was probably the most important thing she had ever done. By 2025, the program had mailed over 300 million books to children across 5 countries. 3.4 million every single month. In 2016, wildfire tore through the Smoky Mountains. Thousands of families in her home region lost everything overnight. She raised $9 million, launched the My People Fund, and delivered $10,000 directly to every affected family. No bureaucracy, no forms, no delay. The FBI honored her in 2018 with the Director's Community Leadership Award. In April 2020, she donated $1 million to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Researchers there later confirmed her seed funding helped develop the test that first showed the Moderna vaccine was generating the immune response needed to protect people. She now holds a Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy and a nomination for the 2026 Jan Hirschholt Humanitarian Award. But the most private chapter of her life, the one that changes everything about how you read her story, had been unfolding in silence for 6 years before the world was ever allowed to know. The performance behind the performance. Carl Thomas Dean never gave an interview, not one in nearly 60 years of marriage to one of the most photographed women alive. Everything the world knows about him came through Dolly, because he never once offered his own account. He met her when she was 18, standing outside a laundromat in Nashville. He was 20, tall and tanned from working outdoors in his father's asphalt business. What she noticed first was not what he said. It was that while he spoke to her, he looked at her face. Not at the image, not at the performance, at her face. In a life spent around people who wanted to own her talent, manage her image, or share her spotlight, that was the rarest thing she had ever encountered. They married secretly in Ringgold, Georgia on May 30, 1966, and kept it hidden for a full year. He appeared in the background of one album cover in 1969. He attended a single awards ceremony, then told her afterward he was glad for everything she had, and asked her to please never take him again. She never did. She has joked that the secret to their long marriage was simple: stay gone. She traveled constantly, but when they were together, they genuinely wanted to be. There is a chapter of this marriage almost no one discusses. Early on, they had picked out names for children they planned to have. A partial hysterectomy in the 1980s, combined with the relentless momentum of her career, ended that possibility. She reflected in a 2023 interview that it was never a burning need the way her music was. She made peace with that by converting what might have been into something far larger. She is the godmother of Miley Cyrus. The Imagination Library has reached an estimated 1 in every 7 children under 5 years old across the United States. Then came March 2025, and the detail that changes the entire story. Reports confirmed that Carl had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2019. He had been quietly slipping away for 6 years while Dolly performed, gave, built, and smiled in front of the world, never saying a word about what was happening at home. His will left everything to her. All personal effects from her music and entertainment career, photographs, costumes, jewelry, instruments, furniture, art, automobiles. He also left a handwritten note distributing his personal property. A man who never once spoke to the public left his final words in a private letter no one outside his family will ever read. That is the most Carl Dean thing imaginable. At 80, she is still writing. A Broadway musical about her life opens in 2026. 3.4 million books go out in the mail every month to children who will never know the name of the woman who sent them. The wigs, the rhinestones, the laugh that arrives before the sentence is even finished. None of it is a disguise. It is the most fully realized version of herself she has ever built. And underneath it, exactly as sturdy and exactly as wounded, is still the girl who walked into school in a patchwork coat, heard her classmates laugh, and decided in that exact moment that she would spend the rest of her life making the world understand what she was worth. Some wounds never heal. They just become the reason you can never stop. Dolly Parton has spent 80 years turning every wound into something the world could keep. She is still not done. Drop your thoughts in the comments. The part of her story that lands hardest is different for everyone.